Hey guys, welcome to the Battle of Saratoga PowerPoint. So, at this point in time during the American Revolution War, American spirits are incredibly high, and that is largely due to the fact that Washington led his men to cross the Delaware, and that is where they beat the German Hessians during the battles of um, Trenton. So British generals were ready to knock Americans out of the war, and they wanted to end it for good. They could not believe they had just lost a battle to them, and they were ready for revenge. So Britain came up with this master plan. First of all, British wanted to control the entire Hudson Valley River. Now, if you look on the map, the entire Hudson Valley River is right around here. They knew if they gained control of it, they would have a better chance of defeating the Continental Army. So their goal was to cut off New England from the other states. Well, at this point in time, they're actually colonies still. And then they would defeat the rebels, being the Continental Army, those American colonists, one part at a time. And they would start with New England and work their way down and eventually defeat the colonists. So their plan was this. There was a British general by the name of John Burgoyne. He led a large army southward from Canada into New York State. So there's the Hudson River right there. Canada's kind of more up here. They are going to go south down into the state of New York. Now, the Second Army, which was the main British Army, is in New York City at this time, and they would then move up north and meet with John Burgoyne's group. So now they would have two British troops. Then they had a third, smaller British force that would move east. So starting right here and moving east. Okay, so the plan was to meet near Albany on the Hudson River, all three of those British troops, because they wanted to cut the Continental Army off, take control of the Hudson River, and slowly and steadily beat the Continental Army. They believed it was going to be all over for those rebels, all over for those Americans, but they were wrong. Their plan goes terribly bad. So you have General Howe, who is in charge of that main British army. Remember, he's in New York City. Well, instead of following the directions and moving north to meet General John Burgoyne's troop, he decides it would be a fantastic idea to capture Philadelphia first. And then he would start north along the Hudson River to meet up with General John Burgoyne's army. The reason he wanted to take control of Philadelphia was because at this time in America, it was the largest city. It was also the meeting place of the Continental Congress. And it would be a huge, terrible loss for the Americans if the British took Philadelphia. However, there wasn't enough time to do both. So by time General Howe and his troops made it to Philadelphia and took control of Philadelphia, he did not have time to send his troops north. So the main British army that was stationed in New York City, managed by General Howe, instead of following the directions, he decided to go to Philadelphia, and because the lack of time, never made it to Albany to meet John Burgoyne, who was expecting the Second Army to join him. And while the Third Army was ran by Barry St. Leger, and he ran into American soldiers along the way to Albany. So now you have this third small army that also never made it to Albany. So General Burgoyne is expecting two British armies to join up with his army, but they never made it. So Burgoyne's army was now moving south all alone, and they were the only ones in Albany to meet him. And he had no idea that the other two troops were not going to beat him because remember, there's no walkie talkies, there's no email, there's no cell phones. So he had no way to communicate with the other two British generals. So, to his surprise, his two other British troops were not there. Instead, he met up with American soldiers. Him and his troop came across these American soldiers. And the head of the Continental, this troop was General Gates. He was in command of the American soldiers that met up with General Burgoyne in Albany. And General Gates had thousands of soldiers with him. This is where the Battle of Saratoga took place. Now, this battle is probably one of my favorites because it is a huge turning point for the Continental Army. And the main reason for that is because this is where the French decided that they were going to step in and help those Americans defeat the British. Had it not been for the French, America might not have won, and our country would have looked quite a bit different than it does today. So, Americans won. The 6,000 of Great Britain's best soldiers ended up surrendering at the Battle of Saratoga. Like I said, this was a significant turning point in the war, and it brought on a new ally for the Americans, France. British and French had been fighting for over 100 years. Remember that French and Indian War that we talked about prior to the start of the American Revolution? Well, France had lost all their North American colonies to Great Britain in the French and Indian War. And the French held on to that grudge for over 100 years. So they were burning for revenge. They were ready to see America defeat the British, and they were willing to help. So you have all these great new allies. The French could get revenge on the English by helping these American colonies. So France started secretly sending colonies money and supplies to help in their war efforts. They were afraid, so King Louis did not want to send it openly because he did not want the British initially knowing that the French were sending money and supplies because he did not want to start a war on his own territory in France. But the Americans wanted French to fight with them. They didn't want just the money and the supplies. They wanted the French to send over bodies. They wanted soldiers. And in order to do so, the French told the Americans, well, you need to prove that you guys have a chance at defeating the British because prior to the Battle of Saratoga, it did not look like the Americans stood a chance against this British Empire. So the Battle of Saratoga was the proof that the French needed. They recognized that Americans meant business and they had kind of a standing chance at defeating the British. So France started sending even more money, more equipment, and finally they sent soldiers and a large naval fleet. As I mentioned in the previous slide, without the French, the Americans might not have won this American Revolution. And also, Spain and the Netherlands joined the fight against Great Britain later as well. They also did not like the British. Now, Great Britain was having to fight in Europe as well as North America and other parts of the world. So not only were they fighting the colonists in French in North America, they were also fighting in some of their territory in Europe. And you guys, this took place and this kind of snowballed all because those three British armies failed to meet as planned in Albany. They did not follow the directions that they were supposed to follow in order to defeat the American colonists in Albany.